All right, good morning. So what we're going to do is we are going to start to create the service that will go up on NuGet that you're going to be able to use to connect to the TCP and WebSocket servers, and then also you can submit alerts through that service or over WebAPI for the monitor. The first thing that I want to do is I can make it so we could do it with WebAPI pretty easily. Maybe I want to do that first. So let's make our WebAPI module. It should only take a few minutes. So what I want to look at here is just another second. This project, and we're going to make a new class in here. And we're going to call this Monitaur Web API. And when I look at this one, we're going to want to first start with a constructor on it. And in this, we want to pass in an access token and then our Web API base URL, which in our case is going to be https://api.themonitor.com. Okay, we only have a few Web API calls that we need to write into this. So let's go ahead and add a private, we'll do a protected read-only string of the Web API base URI. And then let's do a protected string of the access token. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is have a function here called a setAccessToken. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a summary here, which is set the access token, and this will be the access token to be used when requesting the Montiaur Web API. Okay, easy enough. The next one that I want is going to be a public virtual asynchronous task called a get projects. Well, we'll start with a get application user. We don't have that. So it's a get client applications. I'm sorry, get projects asynchronous. And we're just going to always have this little check here. If my string dot is null or white space of my access token, then I want to do a new exception, which is there is no access token currently loaded to access the Web API. Please use set access token to load a new access token and try again. And we can actually move this to a protected virtual I will say it's a void, which is going to say check if token is valid. So we're always going to do this check if token is valid. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a try and a catch. And I want to use a HTTP client. And what I want to do to that is, hold on one second. We need to set the headers with our access token. Like that. And we're going to add a new authentication header value. Which is a bearer token type and our access token. So now what I can do is it's my response here is going to be from my client.get asynchronous, and that's going to go to my web API base URI / projects. And if my response.status code is equal to OK, then what I want to do is return a JSON converted deserialized object of my project DTO from my response.content.read as string asynchronous. When I look at this, we're just going to add this. Now, I can clean this up a little bit. So what I mean by that is I'm going to have a new function down here called a create client. And what I want to do here is just set the authorization token on this client. So now I can just do a using client equals create client, which already includes those headers. I don't get how this works. Okay. And then this one, I sometimes will get a status code 204. So do I always want to leave it to check to see the status code? Probably. And then to serialize it into the type. But what I could do is I could make another one of these, which is a protected virtual asynchronous task of a generic T, where T is a type of base DTO. This needs to be an array of projects. And here you want to have a path and that doesn't have anything here for your parameters. And so here we can put this as the string. It's this, and then we want to say plus if my string dot is null or white space. If it's not, then we want to do a slash parameter. Otherwise, I just want to do a string dot empty. Like that. And then we'll do a full path on that. So now I can just do a return get asynchronous of my project DTO array. And my path is going to be projects, and my parameters are nothing. Like that. And that way we don't need, and we can just do that. And this needs to be a type of class. And that's it. So we can use this same function here for our get project asynchronous, which needs to have a long for my ID. And it's just projects with the id.toString. The next one here is a public virtual asynchronous task of my project DTO called create project asynchronous, which is going to pass in a project create request called request. And so for this one, we're going to have the same kind of thing as this get, except this one's going to be a post asynchronous. You're going to create it, and then you're going to pass in your full path. And there is nothing else there. And this one, you want to do a post asynchronous here. And then you want to have here a type of HTTP content. So for that, we're going to make a new class, just a temporary worker class down here called JSON content, which is a type of string content. And then we just want to have my constructor, which is going to be an object. And then you just want to do a base where we do a JSON convert.serialize object obj in encoding.utf8. And we're going to call it application/JSON for the media type. So now, when we do our post, all I'm going to do is my new JSON content and pass in my So let's do here a U. And we're going to return a type of U. And we're going to pass in a type of request. Like that. And all we're going to pass here is the request. So this one is a base DTO. What? This isn't static. Oh, JSON content. There we go. Like, that's driving me crazy. Okay, so there's our post. And if we get back here, the HTTP status code of created, then we're going to deserialize that into 1. And this is only going to be a create request. Okay, we need another one of these for the update. And so for this one, we also need to have the request.id. And then you're going to do a put asynchronous. Same thing. And if the status code is okay. Then you're going to return U. And the last one is a delete. which is just going to be a long called the ID. And also a path. So you're going to go to the path here and then your ID. And then you're going to issue a delete asynchronous to the path. And then you're going to deserialize that into a Boolean. Okay, so now that we have these generics written, when I do my create project, we just do a return await post asynchronous to my project and my request. And this needs to be returning a type of project create request and a project DTO. Public virtual asynchronous task of a project DTO is an update project asynchronous. Project update request. And all we want to do here is return and await. Put asynchronous of a project update request to a project DTO of projects and then my request. It's with an S. Okay, and the last one here is a public virtual asynchronous task of a Boolean called delete project asynchronous, which is just going to be a long for the ID, and it's a return await delete asynchronous of my projects and the ID. Okay, we have the same thing again for, and let's add our documentation to this so I don't forget that. So this one is get the registered projects, and it's going to return an array of project data transfer objects. Okay, this one is get a registered project, and this is the ID of the requested project, and it returns a project data transfer object. The next one is a create. So this is create a new project, and the request here is a project create request, and it's going to return a project data transfer object. And then we want to have one for the update an existing project. And this is going to be a project update request, and it returns a project data transfer object. And the last one here is a delete an existing project, and it's going to say the ID of the requested project to delete. And it's going to return a true if second. If I look at the delete, I don't want to return a bool, I just want to return no content. Okay. And it's going to return a true if the delete was successful. And that's it. So now what we can do is we can just copy these little bits, move them down here. And I can change out my project here to be client application by case. So this one, we're going to get our client applications, but I want to pass in along here of my project ID. The idea of the requested project to retrieve the registered client applications. Okay. And for this one, we also want to pass in here a project ID. Like that. Same thing here. Get a registered client application. The idea of the requested client application, a client application data transfer object. If I look at these, should be capitalized. Like that. And then one here. Okay. And now the last one that we want to do is right here. We're going to do the same thing as this one, except we're going to change it again to be, actually, I don't want to do this one. I'm going to use the project one again. And this last one is for alerts. So we have get the register alerts. Get the client applications registered to a project, and then get the alerts registered to a client application. An array of alerts, data transfer objects. Get alerts asynchronous. And we're going to look at alerts, and I want to pass in here a long for my client application ID. Okay, let's just go ahead and do a project to client it's a client application here to be a alert. And then also a client application to be alert. Okay. Get a registered alert, alerts, parameter. This is on alert data transfer object. Okay, that's it for there. And we need to make sure that our paths here are right. Alert is only singular. Alerts is plural. Get client application is singular. And the other one is plural. So that's done now. So what we can do is we can extract from this a web API or an interface. And we can mark this as disposable. Need just a second to organize this. Like that. If I did it that way, then every client application would have its own token. That would be a real OAuth token. I got to think about that for a second. Okay, so that looks pretty good. We also want to make this disposable, which will make me need to add a class containing the JSON payload. And then we also need to have a public virtual void dispose, which is the dispose method for this class. Okay, so this is done now. We have our web API completed, but the next one that we want to do is our auth. So for web API auth, we're going to extend this. And I'm going to call this I'm going to call it Monitior Web API Auth. I'm going to go change this to be called Web API Client. And then also Web API Client. And then we're going to call this Web API Client Auth. And we're going to inherit from Web API Client. And in this, we want to add a reference to Web API. Now, instead of doing it this way, we're going to not pass in our access token. So it's just going to be string.empty. And I'm going to change this now and be string identity server URI. And we're going to put that at http://localhost 5000. Like that. And now what I want to do is I want to add a private, protected read-only string here. We'll call this a private in case it gets overridden. And that's going to be my identity server URI. And the other thing I want to add is an OIDC client. Just a second. I think we're going to create those on the fly for each of these things. So the first one that I want to have is a public asynchronous task. And I'm going to want something here from identity model. So we're going to add in a NuGet package here called identity model. And so for this one, we're going to be returning a token response, which comes from identity model. And what I want this to be called is get access token resource owner password asynchronous. And we're just going to pass in some parameters here. A client ID, a password, the scopes, our username, and our password. And we'll just start by making our new HTTP client. And now, since I've installed, I think identity model does it, I need to have my new discovery endpoint, which will be my client.getDiscoveryDocument asynchronous, which is a new discovery document request. And my address is going to be my identity server URL. Then I want to get the response here of my client.request password token asynchronous. And for this one, we want to generate a new password token request where my address is my disco.token endpoint. My client ID is client ID. My client secret is client secret. My username is username. The password is password. And the scope is scopes. If my response does not equal to null, when it comes back, I can set my access token equal to my response.access token. And then I can return my response. When I look at my setup here, environment is development. This is from Microsoft Extensions Hosting. There we go. Finally got rid of that error. Okay, we have a couple of other ones that we want to do. We have a public asynchronous virtual asynchronous task of a login result, which is going to be a get access token authorization code asynchronous, which is only going to have a client ID, a string for my client secret, and a string for my scopes. So what I'm going to do for this is create a redirect URI using an available port on the loopback address. Requires the operating system to allow random ports on 127.0.0.1. Otherwise, we should set a static port. So my browser here is going to be something which I call a new system browser. And I'm just going to give it a port of like that. And then we also want to have a redirect URI, which is a formatted string, which is the http://127.0.0.1 and then it's my browser.port. So what is this browser? First off, login result comes from identity model OIDC Client. So let's go add onto this project. Identity model.oidc client. System browser, I'm just going to bring in here. If you recall, I made it for the Ali Chat app. And we'll look at what's in here. So let's add a new class called System Browser. And this iBrowser comes from Identity OIDC Client Browser. Oh, okay, so it's here. So when I look at this, what it does is we check to see if there's a port or a path, then we open a TCP listener on it, and I think this just tries to open the browser here, and when it does that, it starts a process, and if it fails, it says why. The process that it starts is this URL. So here's your loopback listener. And your web host builder. It says that I still don't have use Kestrel. So I'll have to look at that. This says it doesn't have invoke asynchronous on it. Browser options and a cancellation token. There we go. Okay, we still have to figure out why we can't get from Kestrel. So use Kestrel NuGet, not found NuGet. Looks like I've gotten through this before. We'll just install this onto the WebAPI Auth package. That's it. So now we have our browser set up. So now what I want to do is create my OIDC options, which is going to be my authority is my identity server URI. My client ID is client ID. My redirect URI, I just created that. We have scope here, which is scopes. Filter the claims is false. We want to set our browser to be browser. Our refresh token in our HTTP handler is a new one. New HTTP client handler. And then our flow is OIDC options authentication flow dot authorization. and my client secret is client secret. And then what I want to do is make my OIDC client, which is a new OIDC client with these options, and then get the result here when we await on the OIDC client and we do a login asynchronous with a new login request. If my result does not equal to null, then what I want to do is get my access token equals result.access token, and we'll return the result. Okay, the next one is for native PKCE flow. So we'll do a public virtual asynchronous task here of my login result, and it's going to be a get access token native, we're going to call it authorization code PKCE asynchronous. And we're going to have the client ID and just scopes, and that's it. And so we can have the same notes here, along with our redirect URI and our options. And in this case, our flow is authorization code and there is no secret. Just want to make sure here. Right. And then we're going to make a new OIDC client here, which is going to pass in my options. And then we're going to have the results again, which is await my OIDC client, and we want to log in with a new login request. If my result does not equal to null, then we can set my access token equal to the result.access token, and then we can return the result. Okay, the next things that we need to add are a refresh. So this first one here is a public asynchronous task of a refresh token request result. And we want this to be a virtual asynchronous class method. And we want this to be a refresh access token authorization code asynchronous, which is my refresh token. Now, you actually can no longer dispose of this because of your OIDC client. So what that means is where I created this thing here, I want to make a protected one of these, call my OIDC client. I wonder if there's an I version of it. No. So now what I can say is if my OIDC client does not equal to null, then we can go ahead and still use it to get another result here of my OIDC client where we get my refresh token of my refresh token. And then if my result does not equal to null, then I want to set my access token equal to my result.access token, and then return my result. And if we didn't do that, then we return null. We want to have nearly the same thing here for a public virtual asynchronous task of a refresh token result called refresh access token authorization code PKCE asynchronous, which is just going to be a refresh token. And then all you're going to do is return an await refresh token, not one, for your refresh token. Okay, we've got another one that we want to add in here called public virtual asynchronous task of a token response. And this is going to be a refresh access token resource owner password asynchronous, which is going to have a client ID, a client secret, and a refresh token. And when we do this, we need to make a new client, new HTTP client, where we're going to get our discovery address again of my new discovery document request, which where's my address is my identity. We're going to get the result of this client.request refresh token asynchronous of my new refresh token request, which is going to have in it the address is the discovery.token endpoint. The refresh token is my refresh token. The client ID is my client ID, and the client secret is my client secret. And so now if my result does not equal to null, then we can set my access token to the result.access token, and then we can return the result. Hey Themos, how you doing, man? It's been a really long time. It's great to see you again. Okay, we have just a few more to add in here. We have one which is called a public virtual asynchronous task of a user info result called get user info authorization code asynchronous. And you need to have another one for the PKCE. And then another one for the resource owner password. And then the last one that I want to have here is a public virtual asynchronous task of an introspection response called a introspect access token asynchronous, where we're going to have the client ID, the client secret, the API name, and the API secret. It has. How are you? Do we have a day 1 to 5 on catch up? I'm uploading them onto YouTube as we speak, actually. So everything's been recorded and it's going up there. That's at youtube.pixelhorrorstudios.com. So let's do a refresh token here. So here, my user information. If my OIDC client does not equal to null, then we're going to get the result here of the OIDC client.refresh token asynchronous of my refresh token. And if my result does not equal to null, then my access token is my, oops, I'm looking at the wrong, sorry about that. If my OIDC client does not equal to null, then all I want to do is return my OIDC client.get user info of my access token. Otherwise, I want to return null. And then I can make this into one simple expression. This one is the same thing, so it's return await get user information auth code, that. And then the resource owner, this one's just a little bit more code. Sweet. Using my var client equals a new HTTP client. We're going to get my discovery address, which we've done a couple of times, which is a new discovery document request, which is my address is my identity server URL. And then we're going to return the await of the client.get user info of my new user info request. Which is a address is my disco endpoint user info endpoint, and my token is my access token. This is a user info response. Which comes from identity model.client. Okay, and the very last method in this is my introspection to make sure that the token is valid. So we'll do a client equals a new HTTP client, and then we're going to again get the discovery address. And then what I want to do is set my basic authentication for my API name here and my API secret. And then we're going to await the client introspect token with this new request, where I'm just going to pass in my address as my discovery.introspection endpoint, my client ID equals client ID, my client secret equals client secret, and my token equals access token. And that's it. So now it's time to make our interface from this. So we're going to extract an interface. And we're going to make this thing from WebAPI Client. And if I want to resemble my sorting, it's going to be my get resource owner password, authorization code PKCE. Refresh resource owner password, refresh authorization, okay? Get user information RO password, and then our introspect. And that's it. So we've built our Web API client now, as well as our Auth module. We do need to make it so that you can register client applications. And I may need to change the name of that class now if I can't call it client application. So I got to think about that. I've been going for a while. I'm going to go get some food. I'll be back in just a couple of hours. If you have any questions in the meantime, make sure you check us out at Discord, discord.pixelhorrorstudios.com. I try to put up all these videos at youtube.pixelhorrorstudios.com. When we come back, I think what we're going to do is I want to, because right now when we make these requests, it goes right out onto the Web API, and then that fires on SignalR. So we need to make it so that we have a backend service which is running TCP and a TCP SSL server, also one that's WebSocket and WebSocket secured. So we need to make sure that those can connect to the Web API and send messages. And whether we do that with TCP or SignalR, I'm not 100% sure. So thanks for staying with me again. And I will see everybody a little bit later. Why don't we say that we'll come back here around like 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. All right. Thank you guys so much, and have a great rest of your morning. Alrighty, bye.